The days I make something are the days that leave me feeling the most fulfilled.
When you don't have answers for things, sometimes it's best to turn to art.
Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 175. Wow. 175 for the middle of January 2023. And so this is technically our first show of the year.
Happy
right?
New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. It's in the middle of the year and it was Happy New Year. It's middle of January and it's like 50, what is it?
Stop
50 degrees outside. I know.
It's winter here.
I want winter. I want snow.
You can have that. I've been trying to invite you up here. Come on up.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Well, I don't want to get stuck on the FAA's, screwed up website.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to know what the cause of that was. I got some.
Yeah. Someone was playing Pong or something on the computer because the computer's so
antiquated technology. Yes.
Yeah. No, I've got. See, we're in New York. Actually, I heard that we're going to break the record for the longest amount of time without snow.
Wow.
Something like we're in the 300 something days. And I think the last time that happened was in the 70s. So, I bought a brand new coat from Land's End. I've got these snow boots that I have yet to really wear. And I just want some snow. So anyway, going on about what I want. But I also want to go out and photograph in the snow. Photography in that kind of weather is a lot of fun. So,
okay, if you say so.
Well, yeah, that's because I do it close to my house. I've got hand warmers, and it's not that cold.
Oh no, it's not the cold part. Well, for me, it's the business casual footwear that I'm usually wearing when I'm walking around downtown. I guess I got to get the snow boots. Whatever.
Yeah. I dress up like I don't want cold. I got hand warmer things. I like multiple layers. Put my cameras in hefty bags or Ziploc bags. It looks like hobo, water protection. That's what I call it. I think it's cool. So anyway, that being said, we're in our first episode of the new year. So maybe this is a new season. We talked about this. This is probably the next season, and we got a guest on the show. Big show, big guest. I'm really, really happy that we have this great discussion with Sean Tucker, who's joining us from the UK. We always have to figure out these time things. We're all in different time zones. But we got Sean coming up in a second. In fact, why don't we just get to it? And we don't have anything else to talk about. Talk about the weather. We talk about which show number this is. This year, if we're good, we can get it to 200 shows. Maybe that's next year. Anyway, what do you think? Let's talk to Sean.
Here's Sean Tucker.
So, Sean, thank you for joining us on Street Shots tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. I'm embarrassed to say that I only discovered you during the pandemic.
Cool.
Well, because I just started watching. That's when I started watching YouTube a lot. So I've been following your stuff very closely, watching a lot of your stuff, feeling very resonant with a lot of what you talk about on many of your shows. And I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. I've been saying, I got to get Sean. I think we could talk a lot about a lot of stuff. And what prompted me immediately was the last podcast you were on with the Barry and X. And who was with you? I forgot his name.
Jeffrey
Sidoris,
yeah.
Yeah, and I need to subscribe to his show. It was a great conversation you guys had. And there was something about that sparked me saying, okay, I got to call, reach out to you, Sean, and see if you wanted to talk to us about some stuff. But so anyway, I appreciate you being on the show. This is Ward, co-host from...
Hello.
How's it going?
Yeah. And anyway, I don't want to go into too much of your background because I think you got a lot of places where you talk about, but I do want to talk about one thing, that you were a pastor before you started photography. Now it's interesting because when I started this podcast, my first co-host and friend Tom is a pastor and a photographer. So I actually wanted to know, actually I was starting to think about what's with being a pastor and then photography. Like how did those How did those two connect in some way?
I mean, it's not a straight path, but I kind of know a lot of people who've done very similar, to be honest. I mean, I came up through seminary, and I reckon out of a class of maybe 30, 35 of us, there are maybe 3 or 4 that are still working in the church. And most of the others who left went on and did some kind of creative something, I mean, so it varies, but there, it's all to do with communication and making things, still wanting to communicate what you experience of life to other people, that kind of stuff. And I think when I look at my group who came out and started doing those sort of things, I'm actually not that unique. I mean, I know from the outside it seems like, gosh, that's quite a left turn. But I mean, I'd already made a few of those. I mean, in my teenage years and early 20s, I wanted to rehabilitate lions and leopards back into the wild in Africa. That was where I was living at the time. So I mean, that was what I wanted to do. And I was 100% that was what I wanted to do until I failed the degree, and I couldn't, the wildlife sciences degree, and it was all, the maths and chemistry, which I just couldn't hack. So that took me to the church and psychology. And then when that fell apart, it was a friend who asked me and said, well, you don't want to work for churches anymore. You might as well pick something that you love doing anyway and try and make that your job, seeing as you have to start from scratch anyway. And at the time, I'd been doing a little bit of photography and video already on the side of working for churches. So I thought, maybe this could work, and started chipping away.
That's interesting. What was it that drew you to photography in the first place when you were younger, out of curiosity?
I think I've always been creative anyway. I mean, I was always doing something. I was, sketching animals out of books. Photography was, or whatever it was, or music. I was involved in music all the way through as well. Photography was just another creative outlet, a way to go out and express yourself, show people what you see of the world rather than what they see. And I suppose, I mean, I never would have conceptualized it like that as a child. As a very young child, sort of, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I think it was a little crutch to get people to leave me alone, honestly. If I had a camera in my hand, adults wouldn't badger me about what was I up to because it was pretty obvious. So I had one of these little plastic point and shoot with the little zip wind on, and I would go around and take photographs with that just as I'm doing this. I enjoyed it. People would leave me alone if I did it. And I was quite a shy, retiring child. So it became a little bit of a crutch for that.
Yeah. When was this? How old were you?
It would have been, pre-teens, so sort of 9, 10, 11, 12. And of course, at the time, like because my dad left home when I was quite young and my mom remarried, and my brother and I, who were both came from the same father, when this new family formed and my half-sister came along, and we didn't really feel much a part of it. So I think we were both, he probably me more than him, but we both became quite shy and retiring and sort of tried to sort of chip out our own identities, even as kids. And I think that became one of the things I did that made me feel like I've got a thing to do, or I have a thing that I'm good at, or whatever. And not that, I had any concept of what good or bad photography was, but I was the kid who took some photographs on the side. So that became a little bit of an ego identity crutch, I suppose.
It's funny that you're saying that, because I had a similar experience to that, because I picked up photography in junior high school. I guess you can, what is that, middle school for the rest of the world? And that idea of being able to, like, the camera was also like I don't know, like a key to places. It let me in, and yes, you became that person, the only photographer in the place. Very unlike kids today, because everybody's a photographer. But back then, whenever we were growing up, cameras were rare, and so if you were the photographer, you're the one. Oh, where's Sean? Where's Antonio taking pictures? So yeah, I resonate with that. So, and it's interesting because for me, I don't know if it's for you guys, but for me, it was also. Sean, you said you could draw and do all these other things. I was reading in your book. You can sketch. I couldn't do any drawing.
Right.
So like I wanted to go to art school and stuff like that. And photography became the way to, like, it was for me, the method that I could get in and maybe express myself in some way, because I couldn't do sort of other things. But it sounds like you could draw and you could do all these other things, but photography became the sort of that direction for you then. Yeah.
I think so. And it's part of a long list of different I mean, I don't even necessarily think of myself as a photographer first in some ways. You know, there've been so many things along the journey, and I'm not suggesting that I'm brilliant at all of them. They've just been things that I felt driven to do. So it was, you know, sketching, and then it was, you know, photography, and then it was music for a long time, and then it was public speaking for a long time with the church that became a creative outlet for me, and then it was video work, and then it was writing, and, you know, I mean, and if you take them all away, I'll find another thing tomorrow. I just have to find a way to make something to share with the world. That's what jazzes me up. So it's never had to be one thing only for me.
Yeah. And it strikes me that your video creation is kind of a confluence of all that previous experience too. You're doing the public speaking, you're presenting your photography, you're sharing your philosophy of things, and that's, you can feel that force of intellect and experience and I don't like the word, but authenticity, that we feel like you're really talking to us individually. So
I mean, it's a direct, you know, it comes straight out of what I did before. I mean, my ex-wife used to joke with me that the only reason I started a YouTube channel was so that I could keep preaching. And I mean, yeah, there's definitely a part of that. Like, I got a real kick out of speaking to people and trying to inspire them to get a handle on their lives. And I mean, that flavor and that skill set is woven throughout that channel. Absolutely. In fact, photography is often a little bit of a Trojan horse to talk about things that I think are more important. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it should happen for all of us. You know, we're always bringing everything we're learning and every part of who we are to try and make whatever we're doing right now, you know, richer and more multifaceted.
Can we talk a little bit about your YouTube-ness, if I may? Because that's how I found you. Sure. You know, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
Because when I sort of joined YouTube, I was, well, not joined it, but like really paid attention. It was really in the past few years. You were obviously more involved for a longer time, and I'm sure, you know, I'm getting late onto this. Not that I wasn't aware of YouTube, but it just wasn't on my radar so much. But did you ever expect the amount of people who are listening to you or watching you on YouTube? Do you expect that to take off like that, or when you started? I mean, what can you just talk about, like, how do you feel about that sort of rise in your, I don't want to say popularity, but just that so many people are interested in what you say?
I honestly didn't give it too much thought in terms of like that bigger number. At the start, I always had this goal of just getting enough of a core audience that they would support me making my own work. And I mean, that's not actually, it doesn't have to be a massive number. That, I mean, there's that famous Kevin Kelly 1,000 True Fans article where he talks about, you know, how many fans you actually need as an artist to be able to support yourself. And he suggests if you've got 1,000 true fans, you might be able to support yourself, because if those are the people who, you know, buy your prints or buy your book or come out to a talk, and you can probably put together a career with that. And so in my head, it was always about that core audience. And I've never taken that bigger subscriber number seriously at all. In fact, I mean, if you go look on my channel now, it's over 500,000 subscribers. But if you also go and look at the numbers of how many people are still watching those videos, it's well under 10% are still around. That subscriber number is a mirage. It's not real. If I pay any attention to that, I'm an idiot. It's far more about which is the core that's coming along with me, and can I give them things and ways that they can support me to keep making the work that I can. And every day I can do that is a privilege.
Yeah. I you know, thinking about how YouTube has given us this ability to do things like this, it is amazing, and it's great to be grateful to YouTube and stuff like that. Yeah, no, I know the subscriber number is one thing, but you like typically on some of your videos, you get like literally like a stadium's worth of people listening to what you're saying. And it's funny that you said that using photography as a Trojan horse, which I really like, because that's kind of how I like to think of, you know, this show a little bit. Or so I even never thought about that phrase as a Trojan horse, but it's as if you're standing in, you know, Yankee Stadium or whatever stadium, and there's, you know, 30,000 people or 100,000 people listening to you over time. You know, it's not right away. Not that, did you ever expect that, but what do you feel is like your responsibility now that you've got this stadium's worth of people listening to you? I mean, do you feel that, or I mean, it would be like if I knew I was standing in front of that many people. I mean, I feel, we have a small audience here, but like I feel like, wow, I feel some responsibility for what I say and stuff like that. How do you feel? How do you deal with that when you have so many people listening to you, on a monthly basis or something?
I really try and avoid the responsibility thing, because I think that when people say, and I've had people in comments, who disagree with me, say I shouldn't say X or Y or Z because I have a responsibility to my audience. But what they actually mean is, you need to give my opinion, not your opinion, Sean, because that's what I think your audience needs to hear. I really think you have to tune that out, and you have to say the things that you really believe. You have to answer for everything that happens with everything that you say. I think that's the responsibility, but I don't think you should ever be led by your audience. And that's, I know there would be lots of people who disagree with me. I'm not here to serve anyone else, because if I am, then I have to produce middle of the road work that agrees, or the most number of people agree with. And I think that's how you make bland work. Instead of saying, what is the stuff I want to talk about that I think is really important? How can I say that the best I can? As a self-contained unit, being a little bit self-centered in the way that I make, and then releasing it because I actually believe it. And then some people will like it and some people won't, and I have no control over that percentage. I think you have to do that a little bit. When it comes to the number, I mean, I know people say, well, you get 50,000 people watching a video. Imagine you were standing in a stadium with 50,000 people watching you. Well, that would never happen because they'd have to pay. So 50,000 people are not paying to watch anything that I'm doing. Lots of people will casually consume you for free. I think, so I don't take that too seriously. What I do, and honestly, I think, and anyone who's done YouTube knows this, that it can feel quite abstract, that kind of thing, because I mean, I'm alone here in my house. I make a video, which I've done today, and I've just cut it. It's going to go live on the weekend. I set everything up. I hit it, schedule it to go live, and I forget about it. It goes live, and people see it or don't see it, or they comment or don't comment, or like it or don't like it. And I don't really check on it too much. I'm not going there to see how it's doing, quote unquote. Where it really hits home is if I do a meetup, or if I go out and do a talk and I actually meet real people one-on-one. The one-on-one interactions drive home how important it is what I do, but the number is kind of irrelevant to me, because those, unfortunately, are mostly people I will never meet. And if it means anything to them, I feel amazing about that. But I can't think in terms of those numbers. And I understand where everyone else gets kind of stuck on that, because they use it as a barometer for success. It's not. I don't think it is. I know photographers with much better work than mine who have a fraction of the attention on their work that mine does. And let's be frank, we all know some photographers that are pants, that have a ton of work, a ton of attention on their work. That attention or number around the work that you do is not any kind of measure of success. So I really try actively tune those thoughts out.
Yeah, that's I agree with you, and that it's, and I didn't want to sort of focus on that as a thing of success. It's just, it's there, and it's almost like you can't ignore it. And you said couple things on the show with Barry and X on Candid Frame. You did say if you ended up affecting one person in this whole thing, that's what made it worth it. So I always understood, like, the numbers don't mean anything, but you've affected me, you've affected Ward. There's every individual who watches your videos who get affected. They may not tell you, but they're out there. So, but I did want to also, what was the other thing I was saying? I just spaced out. That's what happens when you... Well,
let me just say on that, I mean, that's really the point, is those one-on-one, like, this meant this to me. So I that's why I don't check stats, but I do read emails. If people tend to spend the time to write me an email, and I had an email a few months back with a guy who was literally, I was at my wit's end, and he was dealing with a serious injury and found himself suicidal, and was going to take a bottle of pills and a bottle of Jack Daniels up a hill. And he started listening to my audiobook that I produce. And he listened to 1 or 2 chapters as he was going, 3 chapters, got to the top of the hill, and he thought, oh, I'll listen to a couple of more, walked around for a bit, listened to 4, 5, 6, 7, kept walking. He got to the end of the audiobook in one go, and he was back at his car. And he got back in the car, and he went home, and he sent me this email saying, "You saved my life," is the title line. Now, like, I'm not suggesting that I'm some kind of hero and I actually did save someone's life because I did something incredible, but I put something out into the world that I believed in this book. Someone else took that in, and it hit them at the right place at the right time, not because I'm a genius, just because you get this confluence of events where something good comes out of it. That one email will keep me jazzed up and motivated for a whole year. I couldn't care what the stats are doing. And I think that's where I keep my focus, is on those individual personal stories where this meant this much to me. That's everything to me. Yeah.
I just bought your book the other day, and I just started it. So
cheers. Thank you.
Actually, what motivated you to write that? What was the...
I was, when would it have been? 2018, I think. I was in a log cabin in Iceland in a storm. It sounds like the start of a short story, but it's like
it was a dark and stormy night.
Yeah. Where everyone gets murdered at the end of it. But I was in this cabin, and I'd gone to go and take some photographs and make a film, and it was just, 4 of the 5 days I was there, this storm blew through with a name. When they give it a name, they're serious. And it just wasn't worth going outside. So I thought, how can I use this time well? So I turned it into a little bit of a retreat. And as part of that, I started in my journal just sketching out the outline of a book, which was on my YouTube channel. I've got a playlist of the more philosophical videos, which are actually written not just for photographers, but for anyone who does anything creative. And I thought, I'm not able to say this stuff nearly well enough in a short form video. So if I was going to write all this down as a complete whole, as a piece of work that says what my creative philosophy is here and now, what would that look like? So I sketched out chapter outlines and how I would sort of weave this thing together. And then it would have been March of 2020, I was approached by Rocky Nook, who are a publisher in the States, saying, "Do you want to do a book?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I've already been sketching one out." And we were literally about to go into lockdown. In fact, I had a meeting with them at their hotel in London because they'd come over for the London Book Fair. But as they checked into the hotel, they got a call to say London Book Fair has been cancelled because of COVID.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was when all this was kicking off. So anyway, we still had this meeting and we agreed to things and signed contracts. And then going into lockdown sucks. But the good part for me was I couldn't do any other work. And I had 7 months to sit and plug away at a book. So I really hammered this thing out quickly because it gave it kind of a bit of a godsend, because I could focus on something in my own space and time. That's the ideal conditions for writing a book. So yeah, that's kind of when I hammered it all out.
I just started reading it and going through the first chapter. Could I read something from it?
Of course you can, yeah.
I sort of condensed it a little bit, but I wanted to read this out to the audience. You talk about this word logos. So that it goes, there's a word theologians use for this idea of speaking order out of chaos, logos. And we get to participate in this idea through the things we make. Logos describes the creative power of speaking truth and wrenching goodness from calamity and meaning from mayhem. It's the lighthouse on the bluffs on a stormy night that will guide you through the turbulent waves into the safe harbor. It is the North Star when you are lost and confused that will help reorient you and lead you home. Logos is our attempt to describe truth, the truth we all somehow know but struggle to articulate. Because when we manage to, even in small ways, it brings us comfort and a feeling of togetherness, knowing that this experience of life with its joys and hardships is shared by all. Good art is logos. I'm glad we get to talk about the book a little in this part, because this is kind of the reason why I wanted to get you on the show as well. We, both of us, well, all of us actually, thinking of the whole world, have gone through some crazy 3 years, right? In all of its different forms, the lockdown, what's happened to you in your personal life, what's happened to me in my personal life. And, you spoke about, in one of your videos, you talk about the two halves of the creative life. And you mentioned Carl Jung said, and I'm not aware of Jung's writings as much, but I'm interested now that you mentioned it, the idea of the morning and the afternoon of life, spending the morning of our lives trying to define who we are, and then, spending the afternoon of our lives maybe breaking that definition. But, given that we've had this disruption in our lives in the past few years, we talk about that midpoint where we sort of cross over from the morning to the afternoon. What do you think happens when that shifts? It gets disrupted. Most of our lives, we have that. I really got that the first half, the morning, defining ourselves, figuring out who we are, who's important in our lives. And then that second half of let's wash that away. But, you had a significant event happen. You got, if I mentioned you got divorced, was it a year ago or so? Yeah. My wife died in June, this past June.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And you think about the sort of the compass or the zenith that we're at, and how that can automatically shift. And so far we don't have or at least I don't feel like there's a morning and an afternoon. There's it shifted. Where's that line? And so it's sort of a long way to ask about how do we deal with this? For us, we're photographers. So how do we deal with this with our art, our creation? How do you what do you do? We have to reinvent ourselves? Do we have to redefine ourselves? Do we start over? Is it the morning again, leading in afternoon? Do you have any? Can you speak to that a little bit? Or I'm sort of rambling here, but
no. I mean, there's a lot to say, and I'll try to keep it short and stop me if I ramble. But I think with Carl Jung's idea of this sort of morning and afternoon of life, he's basically sort of saying, and there's also a Franciscan friar in the States named Richard Rohr who writes about this stuff and sort of takes it a bit further, which is quite interesting. But basically he's saying that, in the morning of life, we're constructing our worldview and defining what we believe about, politics and life and what sort of house we want, what job, what sort of partner, all the rest of it. We're trying to build something. And then at some point, we're constructing how we think the world works and all the answers that we want to have about things if they go wrong. But then at some point, and you and I know this, everyone knows this, you hit a crisis point where everything falls apart. And none of those answers that you built in that first half of life answer this current crisis that you're sitting in. And, this is Jung was the one who coined the phrase, the midlife crisis. That's why we have that phrase. And, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't know how to transition through that because they think, well, if I just move around some surface details and stick my head in the sand, hopefully I can go back to those old answers and they still work. So if I just, find a younger wife and buy a sports car, everything will be cool, and then I can go back to thinking that's how life works. Unfortunately, reconstructing that box and sticking your fingers in your ears and pretending what's happened hasn't happened will, I think, lead to bitterness and resentment at the world because it just never seems to give you what you think it should. Jung suggests, and Richard Rohr suggests that there is an invitation, though, to move through to the second half of life where we don't need to define things as neatly. We don't need to nail everything down. We don't need all the answers. We have a greater comfort with paradox and an openness. And he says that those are often our village elders. Those are the people in society we all turn to. Every single great leader or spiritual leader or whatever that we think about went through some deep pain and hardship, right? That's probably them going through those crisis points and it allowing them and them accepting the invitation to move through to that second half of life. The thing about the two halves, though, is it's not meant to be taken too literally. And I think people get stuck on this. Okay, when was my crisis? At what age did my crisis happen? It's very cyclical. So we might be in the morning with some aspects of our life and late in the afternoon in others. And all these things are this pattern of constructing and building and defining and everything falling apart and choosing to move through into a more mature openness where we don't need to define as much. For example, I think I'm still in the morning with a lot of my photography, but I think I'm further along. I'm into the afternoon when it comes to my YouTube channel, for example. So things can be at different stages. When things fall apart, I think the important thing is to stay as present to that stuff as possible, to let it hurt, to let it change you, and to talk about it with other people who care and who are qualified as much as you can, because it helps you unpack everything. And there's this idea of liminal space, which just means in-between space. So when you're in that crisis point, it means that the old thing has fallen apart, it's gone. But the new thing isn't yet there. So you're in between things. It's where we get our English word lintel, like a door lintel. You're not you're under the lintel. You're not in the you're trying to leave the kitchen, but you're not out yet, and you're not yet in the lounge. You're in between two things. If you can stay in that in-between liminal space and stay present to it, that is when human beings do their best growing. Every spiritual tradition says some version of we grow best in great love and great pain. And when things aren't defined, when we haven't got control over our lives because we're having to adapt, we're having to question, if we can stay open to that, then we become, I think, more interesting human beings with more to offer the rest of the world. When it comes to how that affects your creativity, I don't know, because it's different for everybody. Because what my wife leaving 2 years ago means for my art now, I haven't yet worked that out. I know it's changed me. I know I've had to do a bunch of grieving and face a bunch of things, and that life is not kind and doesn't work out the way you hope it would. It's changed my view of humanity. It's changed my view of relationships. I have to stay in that liminal space, that in-between space, and let it do the work on me while trying to stay open and generous and point this thing towards the light at some point. But I think that's all process stuff, and it only happens, by staying present to it.
Just to follow up on that for a second, I also, for me, got divorced in the early 90s, mid 90s. And I remember, this was also, younger then, obviously, but I remember that, like, that time that when that happened to me, I felt like the worst thing, and this is for me, the worst thing in the world happened at the time. Like nothing, you can't even imagine. I couldn't think of anything else that would be worse. And that is a time when, like, digital was, we're getting into scanning and Photoshop. I can't remember what version Photoshop was, and we were doing iris prints. But I found that I could not care less about what people thought about my photography. I started doing all these sort of experimental things. Like I was doing, remember Polaroid transfers? Mm-hmm. Did you ever do those? I was doing Polaroid transfers of Greek, Roman or Greek sculpture heads. And then I was blowing those up and printing them on iris prints. And I was spending a lot of money. And I was like, it was so different than the kind of work I was doing before, because like, I didn't care. Like the worst thing in the world happened to me, so I don't care what anyone thinks about my photography. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it was such a nice sort of place to be, a nice edge. I mean, maybe it was like you're saying, that in-between space. Yeah. Between this life and the next life for me, whatever that was, I didn't know what it was at that time. Riding that edge was such a freedom. Mm-hmm. And of course, then I crossed the threshold and got back into the routine. Okay, well, I started to care about things again. And I was like falling back into that. It's a rough place to ride, that middle place, place. Do you have any kind of, I don't know, is it possible to stay there? Because I know for me, that's where I was doing some of my best work. And then, I crossed over, and then I got back into my habits, and the world started again, and I started to care about what people think. And like, I don't know if there's a way for us, because that's and for it not to be like at the result of some devastating event.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know if I don't know if there's an answer to that, or even a guidepost, but like, that's the kind of place I would like to ride on sometimes, where I don't really care about things, but.
I suppose there's ways you can do that in small ways without it having to be a crisis. That you can be, like you say, constantly experimenting with the things that you make. So trying new techniques. I mean, I've just had an infrared, or a camera converted to infrared, which is, I've never tried it. I've never experimented with it. I'm out of my depth. I'm still sharing the images because I couldn't care what you think. But like, it's just fun to try, and a new way of seeing. it's choosing to swim to the end of the pool where you can't touch the bottom anymore. I think if you're doing that, you're learning, aren't you? Like where you don't feel in control. And there are lots of ways you can do that with the things that you make. You know what your tricks are. I know what my tricks are. I know how to make a video. I know how to take images on the street in the style I do. I know how to take a serviceable portrait in the studio. I know how to do that. But there are people who are much braver with their art than I am, because I know the tricks that I use. So I think maybe a version of it would be, I'm going to try something outlandish, way out there. And I don't have to show anybody. That's the thing. It can just be for me. But it's just to stop me relying on the tricks that I know work, quote unquote, and actually trying something a lot looser. And that's very important for someone like me, because I can be a control freak. So it's I think it's just finding ways to be braver and lose control in a controlled way, if that makes sense. Trying things.
Yeah. But how would you, like for me, for someone like me, there's probably people like who sort of rely on this sort of, you talked about midlife crisis before. That's actually a very good example, because it's a great excuse to go off and buy new cameras or do something, blah, blah, blah. But how to not rely on that sort of external event. I keep thinking of what is it? Nike, just do it. Well, some people just can't just do it. It's not the easy thing to just say, okay, I can turn off, 30 years of experience or thinking in my mind that I care about what people talk about. It's really hard to turn that kind of stuff off.
I have a question about in this liminal space, and when we're going through different phases of life, or you decide that the type of photography you're doing now is not really speaking to you anymore. So with all of these life events that are bowling us over, is there a change in the way we derive satisfaction from the work that we're creating? Does it have different meaning for us coming out the other end than it did before? Like, are we truly using photography as therapy to get us through this period? Or are we just kind of going down the same road of, well, I'm in a different environment, so I will shoot this way or adjust my technique or whatever. I see creativity as a real solace sometimes. And just the act of doing it. And there's the part, the need to create something because of a built-up tension or a tragedy in our life, or just a change in direction. I'm just wondering what it means for our work and what it means for our own psyche, that we're creating less quality work because of our emotional state, or are we finding solace? And I guess, like you said before, Sean, is it something that it depends on the person? But
I think
go ahead.
No, go. Sorry.
I was just saying, for myself, I really like working in different modes, and I like to get satisfaction from being out in the middle of nowhere and shooting some prairie landscape thing, or being in the city. I recently visited Antonio, New York, and just going nuts shooting in the street. There's different kinds of satisfaction for it. Sometimes it's a very quiet, contemplative thing, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that I get to do this now. And there's just these different motivations. And I'm just wondering with you two, if photography and the results or the creative act is doing something different for you now since these things have happened.
I think it is different for everybody, and I'm always like reluctant to say how that should go, because I mean, to be honest, whereas I do find creativity a solace, that I've had a battle the last 2 years trying to keep the motivation around photography and the YouTube channel going. It hasn't had this effect of like, I'll just get stuck into making images and that'll make me feel better. I've had to keep going because it's my job. Whereas somebody else might go, wow, I've just, I'm going through a really tough time, but photography's rescued me. Going out and taking images every day has made me feel better. I think it could go either way, and I don't think you should give yourself a hard time for it, because there's no right answer to it. You just have to work out what do you need right now. And honestly, that's why I said earlier, like, I'm not too precious about which mode of creative expression is working for me right now. Right now, honestly, to be very frank, I'm getting more fulfillment out of discussions around the book and giving live talks around the book and being able to speak in public again. Like, that's giving me the juice more than the photography and the video work at the moment. That doesn't mean they're going away. I've got a skill set. I love doing that stuff, but it's just for some reason been a little bit of a struggle. And I think it will come back. If it doesn't, I'm all right with that too. If I end up walking away from this in the next 4 or 5 years and try something completely different, that's okay. I mean, it's all a journey, and I've had to make so many changes in my life already that, like, what's one more? It's all going to be okay. And it's for us. That's the thing, is like, it's these things that we do, these things that we make, that we give the world, that we say fulfill us. If it really is for us, we don't have to act like our own dictatorial bosses, wagging our fingers. You really have to produce. I think we can be kind to ourselves and go, you know what, if this isn't about me having to pay my mortgage this month, and I'm not into this right now, find something else, try something else, experiment with something else, and find something that gives you back your motivation and gets you excited and gets you fired up again. I think it's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're killing this thing that you love. It just means maybe you're putting it away for a season and coming back to it when you've got some fresh ideas or you're at a different place. Yeah, so sorry that was long-winded, but it is different for everyone, I think. Yeah.
Related to what you're saying, Sean, though, I've asked this question. Who did I ask? My friend Gene, photographer who used to be in Brooklyn. He's my best friend. He lived in Brooklyn. Now he's in Santa Fe, and we used to talk about our photography. I brought this question up to him: is our photography bigger than us? Mm-hmm. And the way I relate that, recently I was thinking, I'm looking at my bookshelf, and I'm looking at all the books that I have. A lot of photo books, a lot more photo books since I met Ward. Sorry. Yeah, it's okay. I'm really happy about that. But I realize, books are one of those things that you don't really own, that you have for a while. And then, should you disappear from the planet somehow, that, someone goes through your stuff and those books go onto, into a not a recycle bin. They go to the library, or they go to another bookstore and someone else buys them. And I realize I'm just sort of the caretaker of these books, which is funny because I think I own them, but I don't. Anyway, I was thinking about that in terms of photography or photographs, that you're right. If we use photography as a way to make us feel better, and if we don't want to do it, it's fine. And we're not really doing it for other people, obviously. But I was beginning to wonder, because you were mentioning, and again, it was just a video I was watching. I can't remember which one of yours, but maybe it was the one with your grandfather, and you were looking at the pictures from his photo album, and saying that your photography is a legacy. And I began to think that our pictures, the photography we make, isn't just for us. It's bigger than us. That it's, for this future generation, it's showing people the way we live now. And so that we're sort of tied to some responsibility of continuing that. We don't have to do it today, we don't have to do it tomorrow, but we're drawn to do that because our photography is bigger than us. It's almost not ours anymore. We're caretakers even of our own photography. I mean, what do you think about that? Or is that just like,
No. I've done a lot of thinking about legacy stuff recently, and I think the older you get, I think there is definitely this thing that creeps up on you saying, well, I want to leave something behind, this idea that I'm not going to be here forever, but I'd like to leave something behind that outlives me. That would be nice. In all honesty, I don't think I have produced any photography personally that is going to outlive me. But
really? What do you mean?
No.
Why do you say that? Yeah.
Well, because I don't think I've actually. I mean, in terms of people have this idea, I think, that because I have a YouTube channel and that ostensibly tackles photography as a subject that I'm a great photographer. I don't see myself that way. I think I'm serviceable and I've taken some interesting images, but there's no body of work that I've produced yet. And I say yet because I will. It's just I haven't got around to it yet because I have been making videos and writing books and doing a mix of things, but there's no monograph out there with my name on it where I've tackled a subject matter with a camera to say something that I think is important to say. I just don't have that kind of work, and I think that's the kind of stuff that lives after you. But the book that I wrote, I think, stands a chance of living after me. So I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with that. Some things I've done stand more of a chance, and I'm going to work on other things as well as I go and try and leave as many things behind as I can that will say something after I'm gone. And I do try as much as possible to make work that is timeless or stands a chance of being relevant. I mean, I'm very conscious on my YouTube channel, for example, of making videos that hopefully people can watch in 50 years and they'll still have the same problems that they're tackling. I'm not reviewing the last Fuji camera that came out because that's relevant this year and never again. I'm trying to do things that will matter to artists in 50 years as much as it does today, which is I think what the book does. And even in terms of the photographs we take, I try as much as possible when I'm out and about to think about not just, I mean, this is the problem, if I'm honest, is that a lot of us are looking online for what photography is popular, and we're going, how can I do a version of this photograph that everyone else likes, because then I'll get likes. Instead of going, and then of course all you're doing is you're taking a copy of something someone else has done because you think it will get you a bit of attention. Instead of saying, what is my photographic voice? What do I see in the world that I think needs capturing and showing to people? And not just people on Instagram today in exchange for likes, but will mean something to people 50 years from now. And the classic example is, like, I hear so many photographers complaining, oh, it's so difficult as a street photographer going out because everyone's got their face in their phones. Like, yeah, but the complaint in the 1950s was everyone's got a trilby hat on and got their head in a newspaper. But that's the image we all want now. Like, things date differently. Things look differently down the road. So what is it going to look like to people in 50, 100 years' time when they look back at now, with all of us standing out in the streets at night, lighting up our dumb faces with this with this brick in our hands that's throwing light? That's interesting, right? It's not now. It's too common. I mean, the guy, the photographer, a friend of mine, Joshua Jackson, who shoots down in London, he's taught me a lot, like watching how he works, because he's shooting 10, 12 projects at a time, and he's got folders on his desktop, and they're all going into these folders. But he says, like, this folder, this folder, this folder, I can't show this work for 20, 30 years because this is too common now, but I know it will be interesting then. And that long historical approach to making work, making visual work, I think is something we all need to keep in mind, and something that the social media, unfortunately, doesn't reward. And we're not paying attention enough to the big picture. We're too focused on that, you know, that daily score that we get for something that we posted. So yeah, that legacy history stuff is definitely on my mind.
Cool. One of my favorite videos on your stream is the one on self-portraiture, and being myself kind of cursed with being interesting looking. It's one of my favorite videos, and I would consider it like a lesson in self-care. You know, see yourself from another angle. And the thing that occurred to me when I was watching it, is kind of a way to discover yourself physically alongside your impulses as a photographer, express yourself creatively that way. Have you been keeping up with that? Have you, you know, are you still learning lessons from that? From, you know, or even think about it, because there are things that I would like to do, or ideas that I have of shoots that I would like to do in the spring, because I'm in the dead of winter now here in Canada. And it motivates me, and I'm just wondering if there's something, with the self-portraiture that you're finding, if you're still making discoveries.
I haven't for a little while, since that would have been, I think, maybe March, a couple of years back. So there was that, and that was very, very deliberately because my wife had just walked out, and I was trying to work out who the hell am I, and that was an exercise in trying to see myself better. It was when I was doing a lot of introspection about who am I in the world. So it really aided that. I haven't been as deliberate since, but it's definitely on the cards. I think it's a good thing to come back to regularly. Because I mean, in the video, I make the point that I don't think a lot of us have a good idea of who we are and what we look like, and most of us have a much more negative idea of ourselves than everyone else does, because we kind of conspire with mirrors. You know, we look at ourselves at exactly the same angle. We try hide our perceived flaws, but everyone else sees us every day and thinks we're great, and they don't even give that stuff a second thought. And if we can get a glimpse of who other people see by photographing ourselves from angles we're not used to or in interesting light, we get to discover maybe who we are. And hopefully, I mean, this was definitely the experience for me, and I think it is for everyone else who really kind of tries to get as vulnerable with this as possible, is that you end up liking yourself more afterwards, realizing that actually we do give ourselves much too hard a time. And at least even if we don't like ourselves more afterwards, at least we're more aware of what our issues are, and that's something to go and talk to somebody about and work through. At least it's at the start of facing that stuff. Yeah,
it's interesting because it wasn't. Don't know if I saw your video before or after. I did a self-portrait not too long ago. I think I seen your video beforehand, so I think it was probably inspired. Plus, yes, we go through something really significant, and like. For me, I never did self-portraits before, and I'm not counting selfies because those aren't self-portraits at all. Sometimes some of them are. I've done selfies that are or portraits anyway, but I experimented with, and it's funny that you said mirrors because I photographed myself in a mirror. I have this, we have these mirrors on our wall that are sort of a bunch of broken mirrors or section mirrors, and I caught myself in that mirror and I looked at it and I was like. Because it's all broken up and it's breaking my face up into different things. And I was like, that's kind of how I feel, especially after Elizabeth died, or at least it's a way of expressing. I don't know how I can express a feeling in the mirrors, but there's a lot of different me's that are going on. And so I gave it a shot and I did a bunch of versions of it and I posted it up, I think I can't remember, Frames page on Facebook. And I added the story to it, what I thought was going on with me at the time. And I got a lot of response, and I was surprised by it because I don't think it was a great picture. It's a good picture, but I don't think it was great. But the talking about it in conjunction with the picture got a lot of people interacting with it, and that wasn't what I was after. I was really just after sort of expressing myself to it. So. Anyway, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I did want to, what I wanted to mention about self-portraits, it's interesting because first of all, it's good to be in front of the camera because we put everybody else in front of the camera. So it's, we might as well see what it's like to be on the other side. But the other part of that is, how do you interpret yourself? You're playing two roles when you're doing self-portraiture, the creative person behind the camera, and then the collaboration with you on the other side of the camera. How do you want to see yourself? And it's like it's almost of two different minds. And so I don't have a question here, but no. I really wanted to sort of encourage you to do more of that. Cause that picture of you that you took, I think you said it was in a hotel room or something, the black and white, was, there's a bit of the, Rodin feeling in it, the way your body was positioned. And I'm curious about that in terms of like you as the photographer, because you position yourself and you frame yourself. And what were you like? I don't want to say what were you thinking, but were you aware of this kind of stuff? Were you aware of being the two sides? Sorry. Yeah. But again, I'm sort of, I go off on these tangents. So if you know me, this is what I do. Squirrel. Sorry. But I wanted to sort of discuss that a little bit in terms of self-portraits, the importance of being a both sides of the camera, and then how you talk about, giving yourself a break, and how do you see yourself? Can you go into that a little bit? I don't know if I'm going to stop talking, let you talk.
Yeah, I mean, the story with that particular one was I was in a hotel room and I caught a glimpse of myself lying on the bed watching TV. And for some reason, in a split second, I saw a skinny teenager. Until, sometimes you do see yourself in the mirror walking past, you don't instantly recognize yourself. You're like, oh, that's me. Do you know what I mean? And I think I had to go, yeah, that's how I've always felt. I think I was always a skinny kid in school. All the other guys were sort of, bulking up and gymming and playing rugby and whatever else. And I was the skinny kid who just felt less manly for that, because that wasn't, that wasn't manly. If the guys with the muscles were the manly ones. And I thought in that moment, hang on a minute, but I've grown up enough now. Like, that's a very, very old script I've got running that I don't pay much attention to anymore, but it is there in the back somewhere. And so I propped up a little, there was a nice bit of light coming in through the window on one of the chairs. And I thought that I'd actually taken a shot of the light already. I thought, hang on, what if I just sat in the chair and took a shot there, as vulnerable as I can? And so I just sat in that bit of light and took the photograph. And I remember looking at it thinking, yeah, I mean, that is a guy who gives himself a really hard time about how he looks or who he is. He's got scarring on his skin. He is quite skinny. He's always thought of himself as less of a stereotypical man because of stuff like that. But I also looked at it and went, I like that guy. That's actually quite an interesting person, and I don't hate that, actually, objectively, because there's something about taking a photograph of yourself that's not a selfie, that's not from straight front on, that's not a traditional shot of yourself, that is almost taking a photograph of an unknown angle of yourself, which helps you to look at that image as if it's not you, more objectively, going like, oh, who's that? And then suddenly going like, oh, I don't know, but I'd talk to that person. That's an interesting person. Oh, but that's me. Maybe that's how other people see me. Maybe they see me like that. And maybe I go around with this very negative script in my head for no reason. Maybe if that's who they see, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. In fact, I like that. So I think things like that can be really, really healing. Certainly was for me, and that was the start of a little process for me, that shot.
Yeah, and I was thinking that, you were mentioning before, we always see ourselves in mirrors, right? I mean, unless I'm looking like this, I can't, Yeah. But when you take a picture of yourself, you are seeing yourself as if someone else is seeing you. Your right side is your right side, not your right is your left, like in a mirror.
Yeah.
So you are literally seeing yourself the way another person would see you. So anyway, it's something I want to do more of myself. I'm curious about the body exploration part. I'm not so sure about that, but you would somewhere along the line, I'm sure you mentioned like the stuff that's hard or the stuff that you don't want to do is probably the stuff you should do,
I think so. And you don't have to show anyone. That's the thing is, I think we assume that if we're taking photographs is to put on social media. I think I took way more photographs in that whole process than I showed the internet, because it wasn't for them. It was for me.
Yeah.
But the healing work came from just taking the images and looking at them. I shared a few, but I didn't share most because it's not what it was for.
All right. Yeah, I keep forgetting that. Yeah, you don't have to show all these pictures at all. There's no reason to. But
you have to give yourself permission to say that as well, because otherwise you won't take the images you need to, because you'll play it safe. If you have to show the world every photograph you take that you'll over control it, and you won't be vulnerable. You'll try and look cool.
Yeah,
I think the point is to not do that.
And in general, too, I mean, we're so used to taking pictures and putting them up and taking pictures and putting them up and taking pictures and putting them up. We're feeding, I don't know what we're feeding, but we're actually maybe not feeding ourselves. We're feeding somebody else or something else.
Yeah.
And we do this sort of automatically now these days. I mean, when when we were growing up, we didn't have social media. And the only way to get your pictures out there were, whatever, like, your pictures sat on your shelf until maybe an art director looked at it, or, you went to a book publisher, but those pictures didn't go out all the time. And now we've turned into this machine, which who knows how many pictures are being taken every day. Most of it's not good, a lot of it's just recording, but this constant keep doing, and someone of your stature or even on the show can say, no, you can stop, take the pictures, put them on your hard drive, look at them next year. You don't have to keep pushing up because maybe in a year you'll think those pictures aren't any good anyway. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
I think we're at about time. Actually, cool. I didn't want to keep you too long, Sean.
You're right.
I appreciate the time, but do you have anything coming up? Any events or things that you want to share that are coming up? Or
no, not really. I'm doing some talks around the book. I'm in Edinburgh in February.
Oh yeah.
So and then hopefully in Germany in a few cities in April. And then I'm trying to make my way to the States in June, but America don't make it easy to come over and
really?
do talks.
Okay.
Oh no, so So just trying to work out what sort of visas need to happen and the rest of it, because it's very, very tight over there, and I don't feel like getting deported. So I'm going to.
Oh, okay. I was going to say though, if you come to New York, hang out. I'd like to buy you a coffee or something.
Sounds great, man.
Yeah. And where can we find you on the internet? So where would be looking for you?
Just search my name, Sean Tucker, SeanTucker on YouTube, SeanTuck on YouTube, not on YouTube, Instagram, same on Twitter, at Sean Tuck on both. And then my website is just seantucker.photography.
All right, Sean. I really appreciate you agreeing to be on the show and spending some of your Friday evening with us. I'm grateful for that. So thank you so much.
No worries.
Great. Appreciate it.
It's nice to hang out with you both. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
And have a great night. Okay.